Hello and welcome to This Week in Oklahoma Politics. I'm your host, KOSU's Michael Cross, along with ACLU Oklahoma Executive Director Ryan Kiesel and Republican political consultant Neva Hill. On Wednesday, the U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling on the amount of money a single person can give to individuals running for political office. Ryan, while this is a national story, it will certainly have an impact locally.
I think it will have an impact locally, and I don't know that any of us that have been watching the Supreme Court on campaign finance issues, and in particular the Roberts Court, are all that surprised by the ruling. We often hear a lot of hand-wringing on the right about liberal activist judges, but I think that the Roberts Court has been one of the more activist courts in modern history. I think that what we've seen here is just one step further towards the complete annihilation of any campaign finance regulation at the state, local, or federal level. We're not there yet, but I think that that's where we're headed. And so for individuals and organizations that are concerned about the impact of money in politics, I would say that, first of all, the ground rules are what they are. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And second, if we're going to protect the integrity of the electoral process, I would suggest folks need to begin to look at how elections are conducted and not necessarily how they're financed, because the Roberts Court is intent on taking that away.
Neva, what are your thoughts on this?
I absolutely disagree. I mean, this 5-4 decision, and obviously Justice Roberts was the one that spoke very eloquently about the fact that that this really could not survive First Amendment scrutiny. And the point he made was that there is no right in our democracy more basic than the right to participate in electing our political leaders. And really what gets confused in this whole argument back and forth is the fact that we're talking about not it did not change the $2,600 per candidate in primary and general elections at the federal level. It didn't change that limit.
Right.
What it said was you could give to more candidates, you could give to more committees. So and it really came out of the efforts of an Alabama businessman who basically, along with the Republican National Committee, said, look, there are more folks than just this handful that I want to be able to contribute to, but the legal limits and the rules at the time did not provide for it. So, I think that if we want to talk about First Amendment rights, if we want to talk about really what allows the process to be more open, more democratic, and frankly, I would argue that a lot of the political money, including a lot of the what would be described as the liberal groups and the liberal money, as well as conservative, both sides of the spectrum, will be able to give more money across the board in more states and won't have to just cover their flank in some of the states that they typically have had to spend a lot of money, like big states like California, New York, and others.
Ryan, a lot of people are talking about the Koch brothers and stuff like that, but this does open it up. It does at least open it up evenly, so Democrats and Republicans can take advantage of this.
Yeah, I think that if, and I don't disagree to the extent that it doesn't, Neva is exactly right. It doesn't talk about the limits on individual contributions to candidates. But I do think that that's probably next. I think that if you look at the analysis that Justice Roberts and the majority applied to the limitations on contributions and the aggregate level, that at some point those are very easily applied to contributions at the individual level. Again, even if you assume that the First Amendment is not overcome by the compelling interest of preventing corruption in politics and protecting the integrity of the electoral process, I do think that we are headed towards a system of campaign finance that has very little regulation, both on the spending side, which is where we've been for the longest time, but also on the contribution side. And so if you're a reformer out there that wants to change the way things work, it's more important to begin to look at how people are running for office, who's participating in those elections, and maybe even having proportional elections, something like that.
I think the key point there is nothing is probably more regulated and more transparent than who gives and what they give, the causes or the candidates they give to, as well as what those candidates spend their money on, particularly at the federal level, given the level of reporting that they have to do. But I think in that 88-page opinion, probably the best line came from Justice Roberts when he said that the government may no more restrict how many candidates or causes a donor can support than they can tell a newspaper how many candidates they may endorse. So, this is an issue that I think it broadens and widens and makes the whole process better. Certainly doesn't do anything to limit.
Now, closer to home, the state Supreme Court ruled against the group wanting to put shelters in Oklahoma schools, sort of. The justices ruled the Attorney General's language saying the money would come from the franchise tax would stand, but the group gets another 90 days to get signatures for their ballot initiatives. Neva, was this a win or a loss for either side?
Well, I think I think the Take Shelter Oklahoma group had to view it as a loss. They said it was. It was a unanimous 8-0 opinion by the Oklahoma Supreme Court. So it did give them an opportunity to sit down and go back and forth with the Attorney General and negotiate on, I believe, on the language. But they also have a 5-day time frame, which is very short for all of that to occur. So I think their point with the group that's advocating this, that this issue won't go away, I think that is correct. Whether or not this curtails the effort to get something on the November ballot, I think that's more questionable.
Ryan, they have 90 days. They didn't get it last time. Do you think there's any chance they can get something like this done again this time?
I think it's tough. Last time, I'm pretty sure that they didn't use any paid canvassers out there trying to collect signatures. And visiting with experts that have done this for state questions in the past, I've always been told and advised that if you want to put something on the ballot, you better have paid folks out there doing it. So if they're going to kick that next 90 days off, they're going to have to run a much more professional organization that supplements their amazing grassroots organization. I mean, I think that of grassroots organizations in the state of Oklahoma, Take Shelter Oklahoma is up there with the best. I mean, they have done a lot of things right, but they're going to have to incorporate some professional help if they're going to get there for the signature requirement this time.
The south side of the Capitol filled to overflowing Monday with more than 25,000 educators, parents, students, and supporters. Ryan, was this as big a deal as it seemed?
I think it was a huge deal. They kept talking about afterwards they were going to storm the Capitol, and be careful, it's fragile. I mean, that building could fall in on you, right? And if you go in the basement, watch out where you step. We've got lots of metaphors in politics, but in Oklahoma, it's a real thing. I think that the 25,000 or so folks that are out there, I was out there on Monday. It was an incredible event. The energy, the speakers, David Blatt with OK Policy did a magnificent job. Scott Inman, the Democratic leader in the House, did a magnificent job. Lee Denny, State Representative Lee Denny, did a great job. It was, I think, a tremendous showing of support for where education needs to be listed as a priority in the state of Oklahoma. Unfortunately, the very next day, they end up passing a $200 million tax cut that cuts corporate and personal income taxes that would not be realized by most of the folks out there, and if they would be, it'd be just like a tiny bit of change rattling around in your floorboard, which is $200 million just happens to be very close to the amount that schools have been underfunded over the last 6 years. So if the 25,000 folks out there are going to have any real impact, it's going to have to be in November. Folks that vote against their interest have to be beat, and people need to know that if you vote against education, that you can lose your election.
Neva, 25 to 30,000 people. Can the politicians choose to ignore these 25 to 30,000 that went out there?
I don't think they're ignoring them, and I will applaud the effort for the organizers of the rally. They did an excellent job. They had the folks outside. They came into the building in a very organized fashion. They went to the particular representatives and senators in their districts. I mean, it was a very positive experience, I think, all the way around for the teachers, for the parents, students, everyone engaged, and I think for the lawmakers to hear this directly from their constituents. No one's arguing. I mean, the ongoing debate is not that the issue is real. The debate is, where do we come up with the dollars? And I think it was interesting. Several of the lawmakers had pie charts that they sat and showed their particular constituents, saying, okay, here's how much we give to Common Ed. Here's how much we give to these other parts of government that we have to fund. Now, where would you say we should make the cuts? I mean, if we're going to put more money in your part of the pie, where do we take away? And I think that gives a picture of, it's not just easy. It's not just, okay, the money's there, we want it, and put it in the bank. It's more about how do we debate this? And then I think the bigger question is, I would like to see these same numbers, not the 25,000, but significant numbers of these folks go back home to their local school boards and start to put some pressure, really, where they can see more dollars directed into the classroom and away from these bloated administrative budgets and overhead that is a big part of the problem.
So I think the budget question is kind of easy. We've got $200 million shortfall. And then the very next day, they pass a tax cut that costs the state of Oklahoma $200 million, and that's a decision of priorities. We have a horizontal drilling credit that is not necessary anymore. It's like incentivizing people to breathe with tax credits because they're going to do it anyways, and yet we continue to pass that. So the money is there, and every time those lawmakers sit down and tell those educators that came into that building, well, where do we find the money? And then the very next day go out there and throw $200 million of it away on a tax cut, or continue an exemption that cost hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I think that that's disingenuous.
First of all, I mean, there were clear triggers in that tax cut, so that's not totally true. But the other thing is, the governor last year signed $120 million in new education money. She's proposed an increase of $50 million. Yes, I mean, there's never enough money there, but it's not that there's not, I think, an effort on the part of many, including some of these folks that have gotten hammered pretty hard, saying that they're anti-education. The numbers don't reflect it. And when you look at the total yearly revenue, the 2013 numbers for Common Ed in Oklahoma, it's actually an all-time high. The $12,206, I believe it is, per student is a high number as opposed to the revenue, which clearly has declined. So it's not all about the money. It's about money and what we do to help educate students in the classroom.
Ryan did mention the tax cut on Tuesday. Also on Tuesday, the state Senate passed a bill to repeal Common Core and put the job of creating new standards in the hands of the State Board of Education by next August 2015. The measure is opposed by the conservative state chamber, saying it would reflect negatively on Oklahoma when it comes to recruiting businesses. Neva, the state chamber has a lot of pull there. Do you think they've got the pull to maybe stop the governor from signing this, or is this going to a done deal?
I think it's probably a done deal. I think what is clear is that the term Common Core had become toxic at the Oklahoma legislature. It's a political season. They wanted to regroup. I don't think it's a total loss. I think obviously we're going to have a lot of folks back at the table doing what needs to be done to deal with this subject in terms of writing what needs to take place down the road. But it's unfortunate that these things get heightened and accelerated to the point that really people lose the real crux of what the whole debate is about. And I think that's what happened in this particular instance.
Ryan, by the time it's passed, by the time it's signed, by the time it becomes enacted, the State Department of Education would have about a year to set it up. The Common Core has taken millions of dollars in several years. Do we expect the State Department of Education to put this together in 1 year?
Absolutely not. And if they do, they're, I think, even with the best and brightest committed to this, trying to replicate what's been done over the last several years with millions of dollars put into the process, it's an impossible task to ask them to do. We've legislated here on the basis of myth and conspiracy theories. Neva's right. This has become a political touchstone at the Capitol, and as we walk into the election season, unfortunately, the only significant pieces of education legislation we saw move at the state capitol this week were requiring students to salute the Oklahoma flag and to eliminate Common Core standards, both of which are very political and I think ignore the larger issues facing education in the state of Oklahoma.
There we go. Oh, Neva, go ahead.
Well, I think that the one thing that I would add to that is that really the legislature has to stay focused on increasing classroom rigor and accountability, while at the same time that they guarantee that there's no real federal intrusion. That's the real bottom line to what the voters want, and I think what most, at least Republican lawmakers want.
Well, and of course, whether it goes to the House, well, it's going to have to go. They're going to have to decide whether or not to send that straight on to the governor. So we'll find that out as well. Thank you very much. Ryan and Neva's comments do not necessarily reflect the views of the ACLU KOSU. It's